Hey everybody, it's Sandi Park with Hudson Valley Nest. I am here tonight. We are bringing Texas into the house, Austin specifically. We have Shannon Mangin is here with us, a top producer in Austin, Texas. And we're going to take a look at Hudson Valley and Austin, Texas, and just kind of take a look at COVID. What kind of happened in both areas. And then, what are we looking at for 2023? You ready, Shannon?
Yep, let's go.
All right, let's do it. So as far as the Hudson Valley was concerned, it was crickets here from March of 2020 until, getting into May of 2020. Was that pretty much what you experienced there in Austin too?
Yes, we started off the year super strong and then everything just went flat. I personally had all my listings pulled off the market. We had buyers terminate just because of job uncertainty. And I would say by May, June, it finally started picking back up a little bit.
All right, so it picked back up a little bit. So now see, end of May, June, a tsunami hit here. I mean, it was a flat out tsunami that hit here. So was there a point in Austin that you felt tsunami levels, or was it this kind of gradual increase?
I would say the end of 2020 was like a steady increase. We started getting multiple offers more like in the fall, winter months, which was kind of surprising because normally that's a slow time. So it was all of a sudden the trend kept going up. But I would say it was really January of 2021 where it just went completely insane for us, and just everything had multiple offers and literally lines wrapped around the block to go see a house and stuff. I'd never seen anything like that before.
Okay, that's exactly what hit for us, but it hit us sooner. It definitely, It sounds like you 6 to 8 months behind us with that. All right, so from that point, all right, we have here in the Hudson Valley, in our just general region here in New York, we have really experienced basically since June for us, and let's say from January for you, June of 2020 for us, January of 2021 for you, we have experienced basically just a continuous spring market. We have historical cycles, and patterns and I think every market does. But for us, it just didn't stop. It went through the holidays. It was continuous. Is that what you also experienced there?
Yeah, 2021 was, like I said, the phenomenal. Our prices went up 35% in 1 year, but we did have some seasonality. Our market always slows down around school season. So even in the hottest market ever, there was some little dips where all of a sudden it started cooling off in August, through the end of the year of 2021. And then it picked back up crazy again in 2022.
All right. So 2021, you went up 35%. Is that in the median sale price?
Yes, median price overall.
All right, now that's interesting because we actually went up 39%, but 39% from December 2019 year to date to December 2022 year to date. So we went up 39%, but it was over that real, across the span of those years of COVID. Now, if you went up 35% just in 2021, do you know, as far as from the start of COVID to now overall, how much you've gone up?
Yeah. So again, looking at median prices, we started off at $350 was the median price in Austin in January of 2020. By the mid-year June of 2022, it was $650. So it went up. Yeah. Crazy.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so it's been a wild ride to say the least. And then what's even crazier is just we were the hottest market. We got ranked #1 market in America, hottest market in America. We've been one of the fastest growing cities since 2012. Just tons of people moving here for tech jobs, but we were on hyper speed. So we went up about 70 to 75% in those couple of years. And then just as quickly now we are going back down. So we've come down about 20% since June of 2022 to now. So it was 70 and then down, but we're still up about 50%.
Okay, so you were already kind of riding up. I mean, we were already on an upward too, but not the same. You were really on an up before COVID also, because there's a lot of, they're talking about how, different boom towns, right? That went nuts in COVID. They're expecting those towns to really kind of, feel even more, but it sounds like you guys were already poised on the up anyway before COVID. So are you expecting, I mean, what's kind of your take as far as what to expect for going forward?
What we're starting to see now is that the prices are leveling out, like, and there could be definitely headlines as we go into the spring, summer. It's going to look awful when we look at year over year stats, because like we ended the year of 2020 with about a net like 2% depreciation. So that's like the first time in years that Austin went down in value, but it's saying it's only 2%. But when you start getting into May, when it was 650 and we don't know where it'll be, it's going to look pretty bad. It's going to be like we're down 20% or 18%. We don't really know what it will be like then. And so there might be headlines of like, oh my gosh, Austin crashed. And like the reality is that happened it already happened. It happened back in June, August, So what we're seeing now, if you look at month over month, is that it's still been declining, but not that badly. Like, from November to December, it went down like 1%, but the big dips already happened. And so we're hoping that it's just going to kind of flatline. If we are back to somewhat of a normal market, we should see prices go up a little bit in the spring. And then when school starts, they go back down again. So that's what I'm hoping for. It's not the insanity, but just like, okay, we went up 5%, we came down, a little bit, and it won't be as much shock and awe that we've gone through.
Kind of get that pendulum to stop shifting.
Yes.
Just get a little bit, a neutral market. I think that people have kind of forgotten that a neutral market, that's actually the healthiest market, right? And,
sure.
So, and when we're talking about, I find it interesting. There's a couple of things when people are talking crash. Okay. And one thing, and also sellers now, sellers now are kind of bumming, right? They're like, oh, wait a minute, I want 6 figures over ask. Okay. But the reality is just even looking at our market. Okay. So we went up 39%. All right. From December 2019 to December 2022. Okay. But if you looked at our normal trending, our trending was like 5 to 8% in the increase in median sale price from like 2017, 2018, 2019. So we were trending in that area. Okay. So if you took that and you trended it across over 2022, I mean, basically we're up double what they would have really been up if we didn't have COVID in place. So even though, we may adjust a bit, sellers are still actually in a better space than they would have been if we had just trended with normal trending, prior to, 2019. Is that pretty much like when you're saying you're down about 2%, just to keep that in perspective, you're down 2% after you just said that you were up 35%, just right? So, I mean, right?
Yeah. So it's definitely like people that have owned their home since 2020 or bought in the beginning of 2021, they're still doing great. There is some bitterness of like, oh man, we should have listed it back in April, but it is what it is. The people that are also kind of like, have to calm their nerves are people that bought at the peak, what appeared to be the peak of 2022. So if they bought at the height of the market in May or something, there might be some regret of like, oh, I could have waited. And you just have to look at it as real estate's always long-term, so, fortunately all the buyers that I work with, they love their home. They're planning on staying in it 5-10 years or so. And so it's like, just write it out. The market is going to pick back up again. As soon as just rates stabilize and there's a little less uncertainty, like it's going to pick up again. So they saved money by not renting all this time, by, getting in a lower interest rate. So, I mean, there's pros and cons either way of when you bought. And I think the big lesson is just no one can time the market perfectly, but it's time in the market is what is the rule of real estate. It's how long do you hold it, and you'll be okay the longer you hold it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, actually, speaking of the buyers, as far as buyers coming into Austin, where was your biggest influx from? Was it California?
California, as far as out of state, we surprisingly get a lot of influx from Dallas and Houston. I mean, those are the other two big cities. And so I think Dallas in particular has a lot of tech industries that will bring people south. But definitely the Bay Area, like Silicon Valley, is referred to as the Silicon Hills. So almost every major tech company over there now has offices or headquarters, whether it's like Apple has a big $2 billion campus in North Austin, Tesla relocated, put their headquarters here. But we have so much technology jobs that we get a lot of people from the Bay Area, and then, LA, San Diego, we get a lot of Chicago. I have had several New Yorkers that have moved here. So I mean, we get people from all over, but definitely the Bay Area is probably our biggest out of state.
Now, have you found, I mean, one thing that I've noticed is that there are some people who came up to the Hudson Valley and really plan to be here full time. And now there are some offices in New York City that are saying, no, we're changing our remote policy, and, you need to be here more often. I'm not sure, what impact that's going to have and what level of impact it'll have as far as inventory coming into the market. But are you seeing any of that as far as, people that came? Did you have a lot of people coming to you working remote, or
yeah, and what I think one shift that I saw is that we live outside of Austin. I technically have an Austin address, but I'm like, if I cross the street, I'm out of Austin. I'm in Lakeway. So I'm like on the far west side out towards the suburbs. And to me, I live pretty far out from the city. So we would typically get people that got to work remotely and they want their kids in a certain school district and whatever. And then during 2020, it changed their perception where they're like, it's too crowded. We want to get even further away. And I'm like, you're already in the suburbs. So we started selling like more, acreage size properties, or I want 3 acres, 5 acres, and they're moving further out into smaller towns like Spicewood, Marble Falls, Wimberley, just beautiful little towns around us in the hill country. But to me, it's like, okay, that was a shift because I thought we already lived pretty far out, and they're like, we want to even go further. And yeah, and the school district, the school district that we're at is a big attractor for a lot of people. And suddenly it didn't matter. And they're like, you know what, my kid's already homeschooling. They're going to graduate in a few years anyways. And so they're happy with what they're doing. They're, and they're like, they still have friends. They'll be fine. So it was kind of a shift of like the school was less important, and it was more about having land, your own private pool, more space, and just, where you're not in the crowds.
Lifestyle. Yeah. Lifestyle was a big thing for us too. I mean, that's what a lot of people in the city, you're paying, $5,000 a month for a studio. And right. I think people started looking at that and looking up here. And that was a big thing for up here, was the coveted thing really became pools. Or pools, or a pool site. That was huge. Country house, the classic country house, that was coveted too. All right. So now a couple other things I want to touch on. One is taxes. I've heard that Texas is high in taxes, and I've heard it equated to New York, which threw me. I mean, is that true?
It depends. So you're going to get taxed no matter where you live. So it's how is it being taxed? So we don't have a state income tax. So for people moving here from California and other places, they're like, oh, wow, my paycheck is like significantly larger because less is being taken out of your paycheck. But the majority of our taxes is going to be in property taxes. And that's what pays for our schools, our roadways, a lot of the utilities and things like that. So in general, I would say the, taxes are going to range between 2 to 3%. So if you had $1 million home, it's like 20,000 to 30,000. At the very low end, I've seen stuff as low as like 1.7 or so, but that's usually going to be outside the city, more in rural areas where you might be on, a well or have your own septic tank and you have a little less utilities. Sometimes older established neighborhoods have lower tax rates. Generally the ones that are really expensive, where they're like 3.15 or so, which is probably, the most expensive we see, those are generally new construction neighborhoods where you're paying for a new water district to be formed. So they have like a big bond that's called a MUD tax. It's a municipal utility district. And that can take 20 years to pay off, but that usually adds on like a whole percent in taxes. So let's just say we average and we say it's like, $1 million, let's say 2.5 is average. So you spend 25,000 a year on your property taxes. You're
up there. I'm going to say, I'm going to give the Hudson Valley a little check on that one. You're not higher than Westchester. All right. So okay. Westchester County. All right. But for Dutchess County, I'd have to say, I that surprised me when I heard it. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, there are some discounts. So if it's your primary residence and you're actually going to live there, you can get a homestead exemption. So that knocks off about 20% off your bill. Oh, so instead of looking at that $1 million home, they will, if they say, hey, it's worth $1 million, they will assess it on 800,000. So you get a little bit of a break there. If you're over 65, you get a bigger break. If you are a disabled veteran, there's like different levels of discounts that you get off that tax bill. And then the homestead also freezes how much they can raise your taxes each year. So with a homestead, they cannot raise your tax assessment more than 10%, which honestly is like never been a big deal until 2021. And that was like, a lot of people sell because their tax bill like was shot through the roof, and it was insane. Like, no one's
We've had
ever
some funky stuff. Last May, we had a lot of reassessments, and some of the towns, they increased the assessments by 17-19% across the board. So you have people that have lived here that now all of a sudden, and even though if the assessment goes up, that doesn't necessarily mean your taxes are going to go up, but it's the levy that for us that really raises the taxes, but still, there's definitely, there's been some funky with the taxes. I think that some grievance departments might be a little bit packed up coming soon, but now I follow you on Instagram. Okay. And I noticed that there was a time there where you were kind of like, oof, on the new construction. All right. And now I've been noticing you're kind of getting sweet on new construction.
I love new construction right now.
Okay. All right. It seemed as though you do. So what's going on new construction out there?
Okay, so in 2021, when things were crazy, it was like you set foot at a house that already has 10 offers. We had a lot of buyers that just could not.
It was 10. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
We had a ton of buyers that just could not compete. I mean, we had first-time buyers that are like, I have $15,000 and I want to get my first home, and so we had to sit them down and say, you're not going to get a home unless you do these two things. You're going to look for houses that have sat for 2 months, which might have been overpriced. They didn't get an offer or whatever.
I love the sitters. I'm always telling my clients about the sitters. At least a couple of
weeks or so, I'm like, but the longer they've sat, the better. I said, or you're going to go get a new construction home that does not have bidding wars, because even some of the builders started doing multiple offer bidding wars, but some had wait lists. To give you an idea, some had, put your name on a list. And they'd be like, oh, we stopped taking names after 400 people. Oof. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And I'm like, well, how many houses do you have left in the community? And they're like 30. And I'm like, all right, well, let's just not even bother on that one.
We'll skip that. Now it's healthier though. Is now a better time for new construction?
Yes. So the other big problem was I got a whole bunch of people, they won those houses and stuff. And then it was like supply chain issues and, lumber price or whatever. So I still have someone that is not finished building. It's been 2 years and they are just now probably going to finish like this April because they couldn't get lumber. They couldn't do this. They couldn't do that. It was a nightmare. So for a while I was like, do not buy a new home.
Yeah, I saw those. You're like, no.
And then the interest rates start going up. So you lock in your home, but you can't lock in your rate. So some of these new ones, like my young little buyers, suddenly they're like, oh my God, it's 4.5%. It's 5%. We had to get money from mom or dad to just help them get by. But now I would say we're back to normal, like a build time's like 6 to 8 months. If it's a master plan production builder, they're discounting, they're giving incentives, like they're loving on their buyers again. So they're like, we'll pay your closing costs. We'll give you your fridge. We'll give you all these things, where for a long time, they're like, we're going to give you nothing.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's awesome. All right. Now I have a question from one of my followers that wanted to know. So that actually used to live in Texas and now they're in New York. But as far as the influx, when you had mentioned that New Yorkers have been coming too, but from the more liberal states, okay, have you noticed any issues as far as just acclimating, from some of the more liberal states coming into Texas, any of that?
Austin's a very liberal city. It's different than the rest of Texas. So I honestly stay kind of out of the politics, but I would say we're known as Austin, California a lot of times.
All right. So I think that she might have been referring to, she was just kind of curious if there were.
But there's a mix. It's just, like I said, I kind of stay neutral in the middle on either side, but I don't know. I'm happy here, but I don't think there's as much of an adjustment for people coming from somewhere liberal.
Yeah, you know what? We've had our own share up here because, up in the, we're in the country and, there's definitely differences with the city. Yeah. And I think that there have been certain challenges. And I had one of my clients that bought a luxury condo And I'll never forget this. They came up from the city, and when we were getting ready to close, he said, do I call the super to put the light bulb in? And I was like, okay, we're we're gonna have to go through a few little things here. Supers do not change your light bulbs in the condos, but so I think that there's definitely some adjustments with the lifestyle and stuff like that. And I'm gonna come to close on this, but I wanted to mention one thing that for us in 2020, I really consider that the year of fear. I mean, people that, speaking of this, it was like people were coming up in fear. They weren't thinking about the change in lifestyle, because it is, if you're in the country, cows do, when they go to the bathroom, it can smell. And there's different things about the country that and I think that, there were buyers that, really didn't think through the change in lifestyle. They were just thinking, get me out,
Yes, for sure.
The 2021 buyers I found were more contemplated buyers. These buyers had a bit more time. They stayed in the city. They had a little bit more time to think through their lifestyle choices. Also, really just see that they could work remotely and just as productively, if not more productively. So it was a more contemplated buyer in 2020. Did you find these different dynamics also in Austin? Did you find these different changing buyers? Did you see?
Yeah, since we were a little delayed, I would say my 2021 buyers, the first half of the year, it was like a frenzy. And I would even tell them calm down for a moment. Okay, I don't want you making a decision if you don't love this house. Cause some of them were like, we'll just take it. I know we don't. And I'm like, I don't want you buying this home if you, first of all, said you don't love it. You didn't like this, you didn't like that, because you'll have that I was like, whatever you buy, you need to be like, I'm going to live in it for the next 5 years or whatever, no problem. So, I mean, I probably had a few that maybe bought and then they were like, oh, I could have, not that they hate their home. But now I would say we're at the part of buyer analysis paralysis, where it's like, okay, we got a lot of houses sitting here. You can discount, you can bargain. They're sitting now. Our average days on market is over 2 months. So we've got choices and stuff, but a lot of the buyers are just like, I'm still waiting. I'm gonna take my time. And now I'm trying to push them along. It's a good opportunity right now. You've got all these things. Let's make a decision. So it's just kind of interesting what happened between the 2 years.
All right. That's interesting, because we are still in most price points. We are still in a seller's market here. I mean, it's definitely less buyers than there were, but just for instance, a listing that I just put on a couple of days ago, I've had 18 showings in the past 4 days. So that's still very healthy. Now, I mean, there was a time where I had 64 showings in 4 days.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's definitely less than what it was, but it's still definitely more than pre-COVID. And I'm really encouraging sellers at this point, because it's like, if you're looking at putting a house on the market, right now we don't know what's going to happen with interest rates, right? It's kind of dicey. There is demand for the buyers. There is low inventory, and basically just waiting on competition, right? To continue to wait. That's our environment right now. Are you shifting to a buyer's market, or are you in a buyer's market?
So, I mean, our prices have come down 21%. So technically, if prices are going down, that's a buyer's market. But then the weird thing is our inventory is still staying low. So we're still around 2.5 months of inventory, but it's because so much has been withdrawn. About, I can't remember the exact stat, but we had about 5 times the number of withdrawn listings in the last 6 months of the year than we did in the first half of 2022. So a lot of it is we would have probably 4 or 5 months of inventory, but the sellers are just like, oh, forget that. I'm not dropping my price anymore. So they're just pulling it off the market. So we still have low levels of active inventory. Definitely since January, there has been a turn, as there normally is after the holidays. It's buyers are like, okay, I'm not distracted. So we are having more offers being put in. We ourselves are working with a bunch of buyers new. I did have a house that I listed in January. We had it on the market back in the fall and it was really dead. So we just took it off after a month. They were like, let's just wait till after the holidays. We put it back on. Had a ton of showings, multiple offers, but to show you the difference, the multiple offers are not over asking. And some of the buyers, and I'm like, hey, there's multiple offers. And they're just like, if it's over asking, we're walking. We're not doing that again,
Buyers are tired of it. They're tired of it, and I'll tell you, this house that I have that I just put on, it's like they, buyers are tired of a few things. They're tired of the overpricing. They're tired of multiple offers. This whole 15-minute showings, where you can't look at an attic, a basement, or closets. I haven't done any of that garbage throughout COVID. I've done consideration windows. I do windows that are at least a week
Yeah.
long. I've done it the whole time. But, you know, I was kind of saddened by some of the buyers that walked in, and they were actually, they were thankful, and they were thanking me that they didn't feel that they were tricked.
Oh, yeah.
And that to me is really sad, you know, that
Yeah.
like, because the photography, all right, the photography, at least there's a giveaway when you see a countertop that's like making its way to Jersey, you know that they're using a crazy wide angle, okay? But I feel like there's some kind of a special filter out there. You know those filters that can change your face? I feel like there's a filter that changes houses, because you walk in and have these houses and it's
Like,
just
this is not the
like
house.
a house. I mean, you know, so I think that part's been really tough on buyers too, but I see the same thing. Multiple offers, you know, I'm getting multiple offers on this house, but I don't see the level of flight. I mean, I don't think that, you know, if the multiple offers, I think it's going to be tighter to asking,
Yeah.
you know, and that whole thing. We're seeing that
For
too.
sure.
Okay. All right. Well, Shannon, I really appreciate your update on Austin. And it's really interesting to just kind of bounce this off and just kind of see what's, you know, what's happening and
Yeah.
what's the pulse, you know?
Yeah.
Are you expecting a good year for 2023?
I am. I always do. I always have a positive attitude, but definitely I would say just every month that every week we keep getting more calls of either sellers thinking of something or a lot of buyers still moving here. So I know Austin is still a huge tech hub. It has a lot of awesome things to offer people. So I feel like we just went through a little down cycle, but it's just going to pick back up just like it did after 2020.
All right. Well, awesome. Well, have yourself a great 2023, and I'm looking forward to catching up with you again.
All right. You too.
Yeah.